Welcome to another episode of Heffron on History. Today we're going to talk about Jamestown, the first English settlement in the New World that is a permanent settlement in the New World. But more specifically, we're going to talk about this almost failure of the settlement. They had a lot of struggles in the first couple of years. And the question that we're going to talk about is, how could they not have known that this was going to be a problem? Next on Heffron on History. This episode of Heffron on History is about the near failure at early Jamestown, our first permanent English settlement in the New World, and more specifically about that failure. How could they not have known? So the concept for this video came from a student question. We had just finished the document-based question about early Jamestown. Why did so many people die? If you've never looked into that mini Q from the DBQ project, oh my gosh, you should absolutely do it. It is a wonderful resource for the classroom. It gives a lot of insight, and it talks about why so many people died. We had finished that DBQ, and I had a student, one of the best questions I had ever received from a student. She said to me, how could they possibly not have known that this was just going to be a disaster? I don't know. I had never been to Jamestown. I had formed an opinion in my mind about what Jamestown was like, but I didn't have an answer to that question. We had looked at all of the different documents in this document-based question, and it talked about all of the struggles that they had. They struggled with Indians, and they struggled with food, and they struggled with bad water. And how could they not have known? They chose a spot that was defendable from the Spanish point of view, right? If the Spaniards were coming up the James River, they could fend them off. They chose a spot where there was plenty of water. The James River's right there. And yet they struggled and they struggled and they struggled. So when I answered the question of, I don't know how they could not have known. I never thought of that before. And that sparked a quest from my students. They said, you, Mr. Heffron, should go to Jamestown and you should do some research. That's one of my favorite things when a student asks me a question that they're genuinely interested in, and if I don't know the answer to, I generally tell them, I don't know. You should do some research and give us a report tomorrow. So they turned it against me. They turned that around and used the same logic on me. So I did. I think it was during the winter break, during the Christmas break, I went to Jamestown. That same day, oh my gosh, from a historian point of view, that was one of the greatest days. I went to Jamestown, I went to Yorktown, I went to Richmond, and I ended my day in Monticello. Oh my gosh, what a great day. But I took a list of their questions and I recorded answers to their questions. And I have to say, I was surprised at what Jamestown actually looked like. It's not what I expected. And I would imagine that to the settlers, when they first arrived at Jamestown, it probably looked like a pretty decent place. So the video that follows here is my reactions to the questions the student gave me. A student-developed lesson. The answer to my first question that I received from my students, how could they possibly not have known that this was a bad place to have a settlement? Well, if I look at the geography of the area, we're on an island, essentially an island. I have I have a wonderful highway. I have James River, which is in front of me. In the few minutes that I've been here, I've seen a couple of rather large boats go by, so it is certainly capable of being used for transportation. The island is high enough. Gosh, I don't think it's going to get flooded all that easily. It's a good 10 feet up off the river. In today's society with modern conveniences, I know that this is brackish water. I know that further down the river is the Atlantic Ocean. I know that this water will back up with the tide. But I imagine in the 1600s in Jamestown, the folks didn't know that. The folks didn't know that this water is sometimes salty and sometimes fresh. Sometimes it flows in that direction, and sometimes when the tide backs up, it actually flows in that direction. So they may not have known that their sanitation would be at jeopardy because of forces beyond their control. This seems like a pretty defensible location. If a Spanish ship were to come up the James River, they could easily fend them off. If they can get along with Indians, who are all over this area. There are Native American tribes all over this area. That's a whole nother story they're going to have to deal with. Before me is one of the wells, the water wells here at Jamestown. There's a sign nearby that says that the wells are not at all replenished with springs of fresh water. The wells are brackish, that means part salty, part fresh, ill-scented, and not grateful to the stomach. If a well at Jamestown was sunk to the right depth, it could yield sweet water. Too deep and it would hit salt water. Too shallow and it would be contaminated with human waste. Fevers and fluxes were the problem. There's a lot of little fences here at Jamestown. They've been recreated from drawings of the original town. What you would have had here, you can see some remnants of a brick foundation where a house once was, but the rest of this area inside this little fence would have been planted with tobacco. The main crop that they're growing to ship back to jolly old England. As I wander around Jamestown, I notice there's an abundance of mulberry trees. Your teacher learned something today, folks. In 1624, a law was passed that every plot of land had to have 4 mulberry trees. And the reason is, a tree like this can grow above the tobacco crop, so a fenced-in area like this would hold a tobacco field, and the trees wouldn't compete with the tobacco for space. And apparently in 1624, here's another mulberry tree, by the way. In 1624, the council here at Jamestown decided they needed to make even more money other than what tobacco was bringing in. So they decided to plant mulberry trees so that silkworms could be introduced and feed off of the mulberry trees. Now I know they tried this in several other parts of the country, especially down by St. Augustine. I know they tried to grow silkworms to produce silk cloth. Wasn't too terribly successful there. It wasn't too terribly successful here, but I'm sure it was successful enough that these trees are still here.